非常资深的德国的电影的学者以及影评人。他在过去也有撰写非常多的电影书籍，为德国的影迷介绍很多不管是类型电影或者是创作者、创作的电影大师等等的。那乌山马博楚呢？如果相信各位在这几年有关注台北电影节的话，你应该都会记得他在2016年的海地不分类，在我们的国际新导演竞赛获得了首奖。以及他在2021年的时候，他的第二部长片《德国妹妹》蒙古姐姐也有入选台北电影节的观摩放映。然后再来国影中心的国家影视厅中心的执行长王君琪，他本身也是一个非常就是好，就是他也是一个非常令人尊敬的电影学者。那很快就是在此我们也是先欢迎3位讲者上线，然后我们其实在讲座开始之前，我们有一个要先拍一个大合照。所以想说，请大家呢帮我把身体往后转，我们看面向我们的摄影师。
So now we can see our distinguished guests online already. But before that, we're going to take a group photo together. So everyone's the audience, please turn around and look at the camera in the back. For the distinguished speakers online, just look at your camera, and we can take a group photo together.
稍等一下哦，我们的摄影师等一下会从那个入口的地方往后拍，请稍等一下下。然后我也顺便补充一下，等一下我们的讲座会的进行会由王君琪执行长来担任讲座的主持人。然后在讲座的最后，我们也会保留30分钟的时间给现场的观众提问。所以各位观众，如果你们对于这段德国新电影的早期的历史有任何好奇的地方，那我们也可以欢迎大家在那个时候来向今天的讲者提问。
So while we're waiting for the photographers, the session will be moderated by the director of Taiwan Film and Audiovisual Institute, Wang Junqi. And in these 2-hour sessions, at the end of it, we will leave 30 minutes or so for Q&A session. So if you have any questions, please leave it until the last segments of the session.
好，我们的摄影师应该已经快准备好了。那我们请大家可以稍微把你们身体向后转，不是稍微哦，是整个转过去，所以看起来才会很像是恐怖片或者好。
So now we're taking the group photos. Please look at the cameras, and for the audience here on site, please turn around and take a look at the photographer. Thank you. We have the photo.
好，谢谢，谢谢。那我们接下来就把时间交给君琪执行长。
好，大家好，那现场观众朋友以及我们2位讲者 George 跟 Usema，欢迎你们。那我想我们就很快的进入到今天的主题。那我们在这讲座部分，虽然说这是一个映后时间，不过我们在讲座的部分还是会把整个讨论比较聚焦在德国新浪潮的部分。那也很高兴这一次北影在德国新浪潮60周年的时候举办了这样的一个回顾。那尤其是在我们对于德国新浪潮的了解，我相信有3位作者导演是我们最熟悉的法斯宾达、何索跟文温德斯。但是这一次的这个选片，让我们看到了德国新浪潮非常非常多元的一个呈现的样貌，不管是在美学上或是主题上。我想可能先在这里有个翻译这样子。
Good evening, everyone, and thank you everyone for participating in the sessions. Today we're talking about the Oberhausen Manifesto. This year is the 60-year anniversary of the Oberhausen manifestos. And normally today we will talk about the German New Wave. And normally when we talk about these terms in Taiwan, we know more about Fassbinder, Esok, and Wim Wenders. But today in these selections, we were able to see more directors from that period. And today we are very happy to have discussions focused on this period of time in Germany.
好，那我想先请 George 跟我们聊一下，因为在奥森豪斯的宣言当中有一句话，旧的电影已经死了，然后我们相信新的电影 The old film is dead, we believe in the new one。 所以想要请 George 从电影创作，当时德国电影产业以及德国的政治社会的脉络，来跟我们聊一下当时在宣言当中这26位年轻的导演他们所提到的这个 new 这个新，它后面的一个意涵。
So in the Oberhausen manifestos in 1962, they mentions that we believe the old films have dead and we believe in the new ones. So first of all, we'd like to invite Gios to tell us about the context and the historical backgrounds of this manifestos. What is the situation in the movie industry then in Germany, and also the political and social context.
Thank you for the kind invitation. For me, it's kind of time travel. And it's, as you mentioned, 60 years ago, and I was a teenager then. And for me, it was just joining in a movement with great hopes and great expectations that didn't come true in every aspect, but the hope still remains from that period.
对我来说，这段时间就今天好像乘着时光机回到过去一样。当时我还是青少年时期，当时我们对于社会还有对于这个未来是充满希望，还有充满期待的。虽然后来并没有事事如愿，但是我相信这样的希望至今依然存在。
First of all, it's interesting what was the so-called old cinema. It was not as monolithic as you could imagine. It was a mixture of I think three elements. The first element, and that was the most criticized, was the continuity of fascist filmmakers, fascist producers, fascist authors, and of course actors and actresses.
在当时所谓的这旧电影，其实并不是完全都长得一模一样，它其实主要有3个不同的元素。那第一点呢，当然是最受批评的，就是在从法西斯时代延续以来的这些导演、演员或者是编剧等等，他们依然在这个产业里面继续从事创作。
And the second element was delivered by the migrants who came back from Hollywood and had learned the skills of and the rules of Hollywood and would put a little bit of Hollywood in the German cinema. But they were mostly Jews or other victims of the regime. So in this very absurd situation, the fascists and their victims worked together and had to dream together.
第二个类型呢，则是这些从海外，尤其是美国留学归国回来的这些移民，他们从美国学习了好莱坞的这些技术跟技巧，还有拍片的规则之后，回到德国来去应用在德国的电影创作里面。而这些的归国的移民，他们很多其实都是犹太人，也是纳粹时期的这受害者。但是也有点讽刺的是，当我们谈论旧电影的时候，这2类导演，一方面是法西斯时代留下来的导演，一方面是当时纳粹受害者这些犹太人导演，竟然被划在同一类当中。
And the third element was a kind of monopolistic structure of the industry of this dream machine. So let's say 5 or 6 production companies with every time they work together, and they didn't open to newcomers. They didn't open to dissidents. So it was kind of semantic prison, and this didn't occur to the young people because they had no hope to get in there.
第3个在这个所谓的旧电影当中被批判的对象呢，则是这个霸权体制。当时德国主要是有5、6家的制作公司主宰了整个德国影坛的发展，他们是非常封闭的这个一个群体，他们非常的不愿意像比如说新生代或者是新的导演或者制作公司能够进入到市场，所以他们成为了一个非常排拒的市场在外的这些的力量，所以是他们当时这26位导演所批评的对象。
And there were a very strange situation. I think it's unique in the world. Because usually the German cinema program consisted of three or four elements. One was a newsreel. This was more or less propagandistic thing from the government. The second was maybe animated cartoon, and the third was short films. And then came the feature film. And the interesting thing is that every film was considered by the government to be cultural of value or not. And if the short film got this cultural worship, cultural value, the whole program would pay less tax. So the cinema owners invited young filmmakers to make valuable short films to avoid taxes. And in this situation, you had two fractions of audience. One who went to see the short film and went out when the boring feature film came, and the other tried to avoid the short film because it was too intellectual and too aesthetic for the mainstream public. So yeah, the schizophrenic situation was before the Oberhausen Manifesto.
其实，在这个奥布豪森宣言之前的时候，其实德国他们一般政府上面所认定的这个电影，其实分为4种不同的种类。一种种类是政治宣传型的电影，就好像是我们看到那种政治作为政治宣传的这些工具等等。另外一个类型是动画片，还有类型是短片，还有另外一部分是长片。那这4个类型呢，只要是德国政府认可，比如说这个作品是有它的文化价值的时候，如果电影院愿意播放这些作品的话，他们的税负或者就能获得减免，或者是税额折抵等等。所以，比如说有些的电影院老板，他就是希望很多去邀请这些新的导演去拍摄短片之后，在电影院播放，这样他们就可以付少一点的税。在这种情况之下，有些人会喜欢，就是把观众分为了非常明确的2大类型。有些观众非常喜欢看短片，他们就专为短片而来。短片放完之后，他们觉得长片太无聊就离开了。那有些人是专为长片而来，他们觉得这个短片太艺术性太高了，或者他们太过知识分子了，不够大众化等等，所以就变成这个族群和尤其是观众族群里面就分为非常明显的2派。
So you have an impression why they choose Oberhausen and not Berlin, because at Berlin there would be more public, more international press. No, they choose Oberhausen for being short film makers and for the freedom that the short film genre had in Germany in comparison to the feature film. And there's another thing. Oberhausen is a little city or little part of a never-ending, endless city in the industrial belt. And in the 60s, there was a strong cultural movement to bring back culture to the people, to democratize art, to democratize culture. And Oberhausen was, so to speak, the filmic part of this movement. So it was the most open discussion, the most open forum for discussion.
在当时这26位导演，他们之所以选择奥伯豪森在短片影节的时候选择做出这个宣言，而不是选择当时的国际大城市柏林，当时有它的原因的。柏林的城市或者柏林影展相对而言比较国际化、比较主流等等，而奥伯豪森他们主要提供的是短片的呈现，短片对他们来说是比较有自由的，或者是比较有机会可以去做更开放讨论的。另外一方面，Oberhausen 这个城市其实是德国的小城市，它位在德国工业地带的这个地区当中。当时在60年代的时候，德国的社会非常的强调，他们希望能够把艺术和文化民主化，把它还给人民。而当时在奥伯豪森其实就有相当程度，还有相当多的讨论跟开放，所以在这个开放的城市里面，他们选择做出这样的宣言。
And put that all together, you can have the feeling that it had to happen there. It was just a thing that everyone was waiting for. But on the other hand, there was a very, very strong reaction of the old industry and of the cinema owners, because you mentioned this keyword, daddy's cinema is dead, and they thought, oh, they would these young people will tear down our cinemas, will take away our cinemas. And so there was a very, very harsh reaction of the industry, both cinemas and production. And it's a pity, also a strong reaction from critics, negative reaction.
在这刚才提到的种种因素之下，他们这26位提出的导演所提出的宣言呢，其实就是众所期待跟众所瞩目之下而发表的一项宣言。但同时之间，可想而知，他们发表宣言之后，也产生了很多的反动势力，还有很多的批判等等，包括了制作公司或者是电影业老板都认为这位年轻导演，他们认为旧电影已死，所以他们是要去摧毁德电影产业，还有德国电影他们既有的发展，所以有很多人的批判跟抗拒。当然，另外一方面还有很多批评者，他们也有很多，还有很多的这些影评，他们其实有很多的反对跟批评的声浪，都针对这个宣言发生。
So it took more or less 4 or 5 years to realize this movement that went from the short films to feature films, because the biggest aim for the young filmmakers was to make feature films, because they knew in the field of short films it would be restricted. They had an audience, they couldn't develop more. And this was a movement which very, very slowly and with very much of conflict.
在这些不同力量的互相制衡跟抗衡情况之下，其实这股文化运动花了4、5年的时间，才慢慢从短片延伸到长片。因为这些年轻导演其实他们终归还是想要拍长片，短片而言，相对他们的篇幅有限，他们能够说的事情、能够发展的内容是相对有限，所以他们希望能够拍摄长片。所以，他们的确在这些不同的批判之下，过了4、5年，才慢慢的开始有机会能够拍摄长片。
I think that there's the conflict line was centered around 3 taboo. The one was the past. You weren't allowed to speak about the fascist past in another way than the official way, and that was one of the most important themes, not only for young filmmakers, but also for a generation, for a whole generation. The second taboo was sexuality. The German Dream Factory was very, in a way, Puritan, because the Christian churches had a lot to say in this field. And the third taboo was socialism, or even social awareness. If you showed social injustice. You were taken as a communist, and you were a criminal. So.
其实，在当时的时候，德国电影产业有3个禁忌的主题，但是这些都是很多年轻导演想要去触碰或接触的主题。第一个的话是他们过去的法西斯的历史，他们当时的德国政府官方认为说，他们应该只能呈现出官方版本的诠释，那其他的诠释是不被允许的，所以还是他们德国电影产业过去不想碰的一项禁忌话题。另外一部分是这是跟性有关的话题。那当时的德国产业电影产业，尤其是非常强调净化电影，而且当时的基督教教会或天主教教会其实是有很多的影响力，他们希望这些的主题不要出现在电影上面，所以这也是另外一个禁地。第3个则是社会主义或者是共产主义，他们认为当时如果你去凸显或者强调这些社会不公义的话，你就形同是跟共产主义是同路的。
And a little like in France, the strength of the new German cinema lied in an alliance with the political movement, with the rebellion of the students, with the youth rebellion, even with the hippie rebellion, and on another level, it depended on certain let's say friendship between filmmakers and musicians. You know it in the early films of Wim Wenders that pop music, rock music plays a very important role. So taking these 3 elements, the beat and rock music, the cinema, and the political movement. This was I think this was the strength of our youth. So it gave us the strength to overcome some obstacles.
德国新浪潮跟法国新浪潮其实有一些相似之处，就是他们非常的强调这些彼此之间的联动跟结盟。事实上，当时也有很多的青年运动、学生运动、这些政治运动的一样，所以这个也是当时新浪潮崛起的一股动力。那另外一方面是，其实很多导演他们都跟音乐之间有很多的关联，他们都跟音乐艺术家或者是音乐人有很多的互动跟往来，也有很多合作的机会。比如说文温德斯的电影里面就有很多跟音乐有关的元素在其中，所以这三个力量，包括了电影、音乐，还有社会政治运动等等，就一起共同串起了当时的时代社会氛围。
Maybe you noticed the one of the biggest problems in this cinematic nouvelle vague a la Germany, the lack of female filmmakers. Some months ago, I was talking with Marguerite von Trotter, which was one of the few female actors and activists in that scene, that she remembered it was just a man's club, and this was really a failure in the movement, and it lasted very long. Even today, it's a problem that there is no real equality in filmmaking. So they are not only heroes, but they had also their failures.
在这场宣言还有这个运动，这26位导演当中，如果各位有注意到的话，其实清一色全都是男性，而且没有任何女性。我前不久之前才跟另外一位当时新浪潮时代的一位少数的女性导演 Margarita von Trotta 讨论，他就提到说，其实这个问题一直都存在。那他们就认为那是一个男性为主的世界，是男性主导的导演的世界。其实这个问题一直到现在都是如此，到目前为止，电影圈还是处于男女不平等的状况。另外一方面，不只是欧洲，世界各地都还是面临相同的处境。
好，那下一个问题，我想我们在很多的文献当中会提到德国新浪潮的结束点，会把它算在1982年帕斯维纳过世，但我想所有的历史它其实都是一个继续的延续，所以我想请那个吴森娜谈一谈，就是当你89年移民到东德的时候，那大概是离 这个所谓的新浪潮结束，大概差不多是7年时间，但我相信那个影响还是在的。所以当你刚到移民到东德的时候，你认为你所看到、你所观察到的德国电影，然后以及它的这个所谓的 cinematic legacy 对你的影响，那以及也许可以回应一下刚刚就觉得前一个问题，就是如果我们在60年代德国新浪潮看到这是一个男子俱乐部的一个状况的话，那在此刻你作为一个女性创作者，你认为现在在德国的创作环境是否还是一样？某种程度来说，大半时候都还是一个男子俱乐部，或者是你已经看到了一些改变。
When we talk about the end of the German New Wave, some people pinpoint 1982, the year when Fassbinder passed away. But of course, history is a continuum. So I believe that the legacies and influence will continue after 1982. So I would like to ask Usama, like when you grow up, you probably feel and see some of the legacy from German New Wave as well. So how does this German New Wave influence you when you are growing up in Germany? And also when Gio mentioned that in the German New Wave or this manifesto, it was a men's club. It was a very unequal situation between men and women in the film industries. I would like to know in the Germany now, do you still see the situation, this inequality still exists, still that's prevalent in the German cinema even today?
Yeah. Yes.
Please.
Okay. Yeah, I think it is very interesting what George already told us about Germany and the way film and movies developed in this historic connection. And I came from Mongolia as I was 4 years old, and so I had the chance to observe Germany from this perspective with this kind of distance. And for me, it was culturally seen, always very, it was always a fight to grow up in Germany, and especially because I'm Mongolian and I always had this conflict with my appearance and with racism. And I could really feel how people, how George already mentioned, how they try to suppress or oppress things that are different.
其实刚才就已经跟我们说明了当时的这个豪森宣言他们的时代背景，还有他们的社会历史脉络等等。我自己是在4岁的时候从蒙古随着家人移居到德国，所以我也可以用这样的眼光来看待德国这个当地的发展，还有不同时代的变迁跟脉络。其实因为我的外表关系，那我的出身背景的关系，其实我一直必须要跟社会对抗，我必须一直是一个所谓的异类，或者是我有一个跟大家不一样的这个的看法，所以我其实可以感受到这个成长的过程里面，一直要不断的跟所谓社会主流或者大众对抗。
Yeah, and so I grew up with this frame that people gave me, and I guess through this time I developed in myself, in my own personality or in my own attitude towards life, I built up something like a strength to come out. And I think I used it later for my documentaries or with my feature films that I did. It's always a fight to express yourself against these obstacles. And especially as a women filmmaker, of course, I don't know for how many hundreds of years we have this oppression, but I think especially in the last 10 years, people get aware of it, and the development is going, forward.
当然，我自己其实在德国生长的时候，一直是在这个社会所赋予我的框架之下，那我一直想要去突破或者是挣脱这些他们对我的这些印象，还有这些的限制跟束缚。所以这个也是我在电影创作的时候，我电影创作里面角色或故事也一样，是一直希望能够去对抗这个社会给他们的一些种种制约之后，希望能够表现自己。那身为女性导演的话，我的确有这样的感受，因为毕竟女性所受到的压抑，或者是社会是给他们的制约，其实数百年来一直都存在，但是我相信在过去10年当中，不论是社会或者是产业之间，稍微有一些变化，而且慢慢的在前进当中。
Yeah, and I think I really would like to know how George, what do you think about the new German cinema today when you compare it, with the world of Fassbinder and Alexander Kluge? What do you think is the development today?
我也想问问 George 对于我现在的这个问题的看法，就是相对于当时60年代这个德国新浪潮，现在的德国新电影，所以相对于法斯宾达或者是 Kluger 而言，现在你看待电影的发展，你觉得现在的电影有什么不同的发展？
I think of the proverb, progress is a snail. We are developing the things on a very slow level, and if you think at the times of Fassbinder and Werner Herzog in his early years, and people like Vlado Christland, they went out and made a movie with their friends, with their families, and I remember the story that Edgar Wright told me. When he made his first films, he went to these the industry of Arnold and Richter, which developed these the most important cameras, and he said, "Would you lend me a camera for 3-day shooting? 3-day shooting for one film? That would be impossible today." And the old Arnold said, "Yeah, I will lend you the camera for nothing, but you have to show me that you can handle it." And Edgar Wright went to this camera and tore it away. Every piece he took away, put it on a table, and then Arnold was confused. What do you do with my camera? And it's so worthy. And then Edgar Wright put it together again without any failure, and it was working. And this illustrates that the spirit in filmmaking of these days, it was kind of do-it-yourself, very, very crafty, very yes, let's say a little punky. A little like the do-it-yourself punks in the music scene today, and this is gone. It's impossible.
当然，我们常常会有一句谚语说是，进步有时候跟蜗牛一样，前进的非常缓慢。这种慢慢前进的过程里面，当然会有一些变化存在。我们看到这个60年代的时候，这些时代浪潮里面或者时代精神里面，他们的确有一些不同的做法。当时的时候，这些导演如果想拍电影，他就直接摄影机拿着，然后就跟朋友啊、亲戚朋友一起就直接出门去拍电影了。现在这个环境里面，可能无法想象，比如说几天之内就拍完一部作品。那我记得 Edgar Wright 有跟我提到过，他当时要拍第一部作品的时候，他当时没有摄影机，他就去找了一个摄影机公司，然后问他说，可不可以跟你们借摄影机拍片？我只要3天就好，我花3天就可以拍完一部电影。从现在想象现在的时空背景看起来，感觉好像不太可能。那当时这个摄影机公司老板就跟我说：“哦，可以啊，可以免费借你，但是我要先确认你知道摄影机怎么使用才可以。”那 Edgar Wright 就一言不发的，那把摄影机拿过来之后呢，就直接在他面前把摄影机全部拆开成零件放在桌子上。那一开始这个摄影机老板就很困惑说，公司老板就很困惑说你在干嘛？把我的摄影机全部拆开来要做什么？那接下来呢 ，Edgar Wright 就把摄影机完全在一步一步把它拼回去，然后拼回到原来可以操作的这个正常运作的模式。所以对我们来说，这个故事其实可以反映出来，他们当时的这些电影导演其实非常有这种 DIY 的精神，自己动手做的精神，也有一点，比如说我们音乐圈里面说的朋克精神，他们一切都是从基础，然后开始一步一步的往上进行看，然后拍摄他们想要拍的电影。
I wonder what your experience with the German system of filmmaking is, because there are a lot of complaints, really, and sometimes it's a little absurd because there's so much institution for financing a film. There's so much voices who want to say you go in that direction, you go in that direction. There's a really a lack of freedom in the German cinema today, which I think Fassbinder is rotating in his grave for that situation. One female filmmaker told me that from the first script, you have to show the script to those institutions, to the making of the film. 5 years is short. so you can imagine the slowness and also the changing and changing. You have to change in your script that because there are money from television in it, and that doesn't suit for television viewers and so on. You have a totally lack of self consciousness and even a lack of creative freedom. And for that, I think there is a new movement from very young people, also very important for migrant people or people who work in different countries, who are not rooted in one country, but go through from one country to the other. There are a lot of filmmakers like that, and they I think at the moment being that they develop a really new kind of filmmaking, like filming, with a smartphone, and no budget and no institution at all for my films. And maybe this you can imagine how strong the oppression of this system is.
那另外一点，其实我刚才提到这个过去已经消逝、已经不复存在这些历史传统之后，我也想问一下Usama，他现在作为一位导演，在看待德国的体制的时候，有什么样的想法？因为其实德国体制一直以来都为人诟病跟抱怨，有这么多的机构，你要去筹资募资的时候，其实有不同的机构，你可以去拿他的奖助金。可是拿奖助金是有很多的代价的，比如说你的剧本写好了，你要经过他们来看了之后，很多人开始对你指指点点，所以说你应该要怎么拍、怎么写、怎么编剧、怎么样去构思等等。这过程里面有一位女性导演跟我说，从剧本交出去之后，到最后真的进入拍摄的时候，这个过程当中5年还算短的了。所以其实这个过程里面非常的耗时间，非常的漫长，而且有非常多的这些外在的因素会压抑了很多导演他们的创作自由或者是表达自由。很多人认为在这样过程里面，他们其实没有任何太多可以发挥的空间。现在我们看有些年轻的导演，他们其实有一些新的方法。那这些新的导演，他们也许是来自移民世代，他们并不是从小到大都生活在同一个国家，他们有这个流离的背景，他们并不是从小就习惯这样的一个体制跟制度的时候，他们开始有新的创作方法，他们可能不去找这些机构申请经费，他们可能用手机拍摄，甚至零预算等等。所以我好奇的是，以 Usama 他们的角度而言，他们怎么样看待这个人，他们这样的体制之下，这么压抑的情况之下，又有什么样新的反动或者是反抗的力量？
Yeah, I think the filmmakers nowadays who are really into filmmaking, who really want to discover their own language for filmmaking, they really have to fight against a big system. The system, they really want you to make movies like you know it from the USA, like you know it from Hollywood. And, the mainstream cinema in Germany is very much copying this. It's already kind of a mechanism that you have to build a movie just like that, and then it's done. So it's you cannot really feel the filmmaking or the language And that is hurtful, of course, for the filmmakers if you have to see it. And that is something that is pretty successful because there's this big money machine behind it.
在德国的电影创作者，如果现在他们想要用自己的语汇进行创作的时候，其实都要对抗这个非常庞大的体制跟机制。这些庞大跟体制跟机制都希望你能够去仿效好莱坞那套模式，比如说故事应该有什么样的架构，什么样的起承转合，应该要怎么拍。所以很多时候，现在德国的这些大众或主流电影，其实都很像是美国好莱坞模式的复制贴上版本一样。在这种情况之下，如果你想要尝试不一样的事情或不一样的方法的话，的确有很多的意志的力量存在。
Yeah, but everybody's afraid. And we already know what happened the last 2-3 years with the world, and they really want to keep this track because they think that's the only way to maintain the film industry. And because of this being angry, being very anxious and very frightful or afraid of the situation, the people don't let new people in. Because I think there are so many filmmakers in Germany and everywhere who are very different with their own language or who really want to discover this, but they don't have the same power to come up and to come to the surface, actually.
在过去2年，大家都知道世界上面对了很多的变迁跟动荡的情况之下，这些既得利益者或者电影产业相对而言更加的保守了。他们更希望这些既有的体制、既有的制度跟既有的模式可以继续的运作下去，因为毕竟有成功经验，他们想要继续延续下去。可就造成了很多的德国的导演，其实有很多他们自己想要说的故事、新的语汇等等，却没有机会或很少有机会可以浮上台面。
And maybe Germany has kind of an identity problem because of what happened in the Second World War with the Holocaust and everything. That is, I think, a very deep problem. So I can feel it when I'm talking to Germans. And I mean, I'm also a German and I love the language and the early beginnings in Germany when like Metropolis or something. These are very modern movies. And I just imagine when we would have such a freedom of making movies like that, like in the 20s, because, the culture is so rich. And I really don't get it why, Germans, they really have to approach this worthful cultural DNA.
其实德国的文化非常的丰富多彩，但是我在跟很多德国人交谈的时候，我自己当然也是德国人，但是我跟这些从小就生长在德国的这些德国人，他们一起沟通的时候，就发现，也许是2次大战之后留下来的伤痕，或者是也许是纳粹大屠杀的这个阴影，到现在还是有很多根深蒂固的问题，导致他们现在非常的恪守很多的体制跟很多的制度，所以反倒我认为，其实比如说我们回顾看1920年代的时候，德国电影其实是非常自由、非常奔放的，其实有非常丰富的内容，所以我也很好奇他们为什么会当时最后现在会开始采用这样的制度跟模式去看待电影艺术的创作。
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just have this feeling we nowadays we talk about so many important issues, over social media and over everything. We talk like never before, but at the same time we go backwards. When it comes to sexuality, when it comes to female body feelings and stuff like that. On Instagram, you can see bodies over bodies, but it's, I have the feeling that the body measurements and the law of how a body must be is quite, fixed, and you cannot really change it. So I think we're almost back, like what the US just did with the abortion laws and stuff like that. This is, I think you can really say that these new developments through social media really made it more worse, yeah.
虽然现在我们有很多的管道跟很多的平台可以去发表个人的意见，去关心自己对于各项议题的看法，比如说很多社群平台都是如此。但是其实我觉得有时候其实社会反而是不断在后退、不断在退步的。比如说人们对于性、对于女性的身体、女性的感受等等，好像都有一些固着的印象，而且透过社群媒体之后，更加强化这些固着印象，更加难以打破或更加难以去抗拒等等。比如说我们现在看到最近的时候，美国才针对堕胎权的这个限制重新产生更多的这些问题等等。我觉得，即便我们现在有这么多的社群媒体的这个管道跟但是其实我们在社会上面对于这些议题反而是更加线索的。
那刚刚其实那个Senna 提到一个认同的问题，那我想把这个问题再拉回来到德国新浪潮时期。那我想许多国家的国族电影其实都会处理国族认同、处理历史认同、处理文化认同。但是作为一个假设是一个被压迫的国族的时候，其实这个认同的论述它会有一个相对来讲的正当性。但是对于德国人而言，其实回头在60年代，也就是离2次世界大战的这个犹太大屠杀并没有很久的这个时间之后，是什么样的一个我姑且会用勇气来去谈，就是能够让60年代的这些新导演们这么勇敢的去直面这一段其实并不光彩的历史。那在我们许多对于国族的论述当中，其实很早19世纪法国的历史学家雷南就说过，国族的本质有一部分是所有的人有一些共同点，但有另外一部分是其实所有的人同时遗忘了很多事情，而这个遗忘常常不只是发生在政府的层次，对于人民而言，很多时候那样的不光彩，那样的一个犹太大屠杀历史，其实是要转回头要忘记的，要放在一边。但是什么样的一个驱力，去让德国新浪潮当时的导演认为我们一定要重新面对历史？什么样的勇气？当他在面对历史的时候，其实那一段历史所牵涉到的，不是那个好久好久以前的人，而是可能是他的祖父母辈，他们怎么样去跟这样的一个历史对话，从他们个人的层次，从身为一个德国人的认同层次。
I think the social political context is definitely is a factor that influences the film developments in countries like they are oppressed in the past. Maybe they need to use films to find their cultural identity, political identity, and national identity. That's a common situations for the countries that have been oppressed. In the 1960s in Germany, there was actually not that far away from the Second World War. I would like to know that what makes these group of young filmmakers so courageous, I would say, to face this period of time, this dark times that is not actually not far away from then, as maybe happens into the parents or to their grandparents. Because for the French scholars in the 19th century have mentioned that the constitution of the compositions of the nations come from a group of people with similar traits, or they have collectively forgotten something or collectively obedience. For the German governments, they may try to forget that dark histories in the Second World War, but what makes or what prompt this group of young filmmakers in the 1960s to decide to address and approach these topics?
Well, it's a little more complicated, like it's every time. After the World War, so-called Hour Zero, there was a strong movement in making films about the Holocaust, the fascism, the war, and it was influenced by Italian neorealism. And there was a so-called movie of ruins, because the plots were in the ruins, but it was a lot of conflict and drama about the fascist criminals. The most developed plot like in the films of Wolfgang Staudt, was we have to search for the criminals, the war criminals, the concentration camp leaders, and so on. And I think it's about 20 films in the years between 1945 and 1950, which dealt with um, the deep wounds and the victims. And then came like it happened in Italy. It came a very conservative government and changed the law of film production. So it was a political will to suppress these themes. It's not only that all German would have this notion, let's forget about it. No, it was it was the laws, it was a financing, it was a taxation, as happened in Italy, where neorealism came to an end because there was a conservative government.
其实当时的情况相对而言其实相当复杂。其实，在二次大战结束之后呢，其实在1945年到50年代之间的1945年到1950年之间的时候，这几年其实当时有很多的电影，他们都在触碰这些二次大战的问题、法西斯主义的问题，还有纳粹时期的问题等等。那当时有一些导演，他们希望这些作品呢，其实是一部分受到的是意大利新写实主义的影响，他们常常说这是废墟电影，他们要从废墟里面去重新去发掘出不同的问题，跟他们甚至要希望去找到这些不论是集中营当时的管理者，或者是战犯，或者是这些过去的罪犯等等。这是当时在1945年到1950年代1950年的时候，其实的确曾经他们进行的这些电影的拍摄。那后来为什么会改变风向呢？其实是有很多政治意志的影响。1950年的时候，保守派政府上台，他们当时制定了很多的法律，他们开始去进行很多的限制，所以让大家开始不愿意碰触这个问题。而且除了这个法律之外，还有税负上面，还有募资上面、资金上面这些种种限制，让这些电影因此而销声匿迹。其实这种情况就跟当时意大利的这个新写实主义，他们之所以终止，也是因为保守派政府上台之后，他们改变了很多的制度跟规范。
And in the end of the 60s and the 70s, I think that there were a lot of films dealing with these problems, but there were vast discussion. How do we do it? How can we do it? How there was one as I remember, like godlike dogma. You can't picture concentration camps. It's just impossible to show what happened there. And then came Tempest, this American television series, Holocaust, and the German public went crazy at that. No, now the Americans tell us how to deal with this problem, and this discussion went on and it goes on, and it's not finished. We have at the moment, let's say, a tenth of our film production deals with fascism and World War, but they deal in very, very different ways. There is a kind of appeasement, a kind of normalization of oh, okay, it's all okay, it wasn't so bad, or it's all forgotten. And there's another strain that says we're just in the beginning of understanding what was happening with us, what was happening with our grandfathers, grandmothers. There's maybe one movie that tells us that's all. It's called Our Fathers, Our Mothers, and it's just like one of let's say the mid generation in the 40s who tells stories about fathers and mothers in the World War and in the fascist time, and it was so a big lie, so a very shameless lie that every German was a good man. Only the big bad wolf Hitler had his fingers in everything, and you could see that in a film like that continued the fascist propaganda till the 80s and 90s. But to be optimistic, there was a really opposition against such films.
在60年代末70年代初的时候，其实德国的他们的电影人就开始很热烈的讨论，不断在思考到底要怎么样去处理，怎么切入这个2次大战的问题或纳粹的问题等等。但他们一直都讨论到没有一个答案，就是到底应该要怎么样处理，每个人的意见都不相同。当时有些人认为说，我们就是没有办法去呈现纳粹集中营里面到底是什么样子，所以这是一个无法触碰的主题。但是在1978年的时候，美国就推出了一部电视影集，就叫做 Holocaust， 就是纳粹大屠杀。然后这时候很多德国的电影导演就开始觉得，我们拍不出来的东西，既然美国人开始教我们怎么拍，到底要怎么拍纳粹大屠杀跟纳粹集中营，所以又产生了很多的论辩跟讨论，到底应该要怎么样制作，怎么样进行讨论等等。那这些的过程当中，其实一直到现在，还是有很多人用不同的方式试图去处理这段时间的历史。有些人试图要去正常化，要去好像告诉大家说，这件事情其实没有这么的严重，这么的可怕，这么的变化这么的剧烈等等，它是一个其实正常的历史发展的过程一部分而已。那有一些人认为，我们其实才刚刚开始想要去试图了解我们的父母、我们的上一辈等等、上一代等等，他们到底是怎么样去经历这一切的事情的？所以他们其实每个的电影导演，他们其实都一直有不同的观点跟不同的想法。比如说前几年的时候，其实有一部另外电视影集叫做我们的父辈 Our Fathers and Mothers， 在这部作品里面，他们就好像把整个社会都变成好像一整个社会都非常的健康良善，然后非常的善良，非常的天真纯真，整个社会就只有希特勒这个大坏人而已，其他的人都是非常天真无辜，而一直受到误导之下产生了这件事情，所以这是另外一个呈现的方式。当然这部作品也受到很多批评，认为说太过于漂白这个事情的变化，所以其实一直到现在，人们对于怎么样去处理这个问题还是有很多不同的想法跟做法。
那我想刚刚在George 的回答当中提到一个很关键的国家，就是美国。那其实德国在2次世界大战之后跟美国的关系，也就是德国做一个战败国，那美国作为一个这个同盟国的核心成员，同时又是一个资本主义的一个最主要的这个散播者。那其实在整个德国的一个发展上，那以及德国新浪潮发展上，其实扮演了很关键的一个角色。那不管是在德国新浪潮电影当中，我们会看到对于美国的这种文化，那尤其是资本主义形态文化的一种批判或质疑。但同时也很有趣的是，德国新浪潮至少在英美其实是透过被美国的关注而让德国新浪潮其实站上了一个世界影坛，然后重新被很具体的去讨论跟谈述。所以也想就是请2位，其实在不同的时间点，一个是在60年代德国新浪潮跟美国这个国家，不管是在影片的一个主题，也就是这个意识形态上，或者是实际上在电影工业的一个我们讲全球的这个电影市场的一个政治上，美国跟德国之间的一种互动关系。那对于德国新浪潮导演而言，他们怎么看待美国的国家，以及对于Usema来讲，现在在一个这个他的时间点，怎么去看待 他的作品要如何跟世界影坛对话，以及这个世界影坛相当程度还是有一个很大的一个力量哈，姑且可能不会只是所谓的好莱坞，但是其实是一个美国的一个工业力量，他怎么样去思考自己的作品跟一个这个所谓的国际影坛的一个定位的关系。
So the next question refers to both of you here. And in Gio's answers, you mentioned the important countries, America. America has been influential after the Second World War, with the capitalism, with all the influences in the Allied countries, and on the other hand, Germany was a divided country as well. So in the German New Wave, you can see that these directors are criticizing the capitalism from America. But on the other hand, the German New Wave and these directors are getting recognized by the American audience and viewers, and then get the recognitions from the world. So how do they think about the relationship between Germany and America, and how do they criticize or in some way questions German capitalisms from America as well? And the question to Usama is that as we can see, that the film industries around the world, at least the mainstream film industries, are monopolized by America and Hollywood. And how do you think about your films in this context, in this world, and how do you try to engage with the audience from around the world with your film?
All right. I remember one movie. It's called Deutschland im Herbst. It's a movie with several short films, and I have seen it while I was studying, and I really didn't know about it, and I didn't know which section which filmmaker did the sections, and but of course there was this one from Fassbinder, and the DP was Scorsese's DP, Michael Ballhaus, and they met, while filmmaking in Munich, and I really had to laugh about it because, it's a very old movie, and there is Fassbinder, who is actually also playing in this one, and he holds his telephone here. There's this scene where he's all naked, and he's talking to someone on the phone, and at the same time, with the other hand, he is grabbing his balls and playing around with his balls, and the camera's just full on his whole body. And I knew instantly this is power, because it is just the way how you have to treat film culture and people in the audience, because he talked in this moment, he talked to me, not because of his balls or something, but because he showed his all, and that is something that you wouldn't see normally by people, because everybody's ashamed. And this word, being ashamed, is such a big fault, such a big mistake. And he said, in this moment, he said, don't be ashamed. Just show the person who you are.
我记得我其实在大学的时候看过一部电影，叫做Deutschland im Herbst， 那个是英文叫做 Germany in the Autumn。那这部作品呢，其实是多部短片一起所组合而成的。其实我当时并不知道哪一部短片是哪位导演所拍摄的，但其中有一段是拉斯宾达所拍摄的。他当时在这画面里面呈现的这个角色，他角色当中他就拿着电话在对着电话那头的某个人讲话。但我当时就觉得这个画面里面，他其实在对的就是对着我讲话，或者是对着观众讲话，因为他里面提到的是，其实是不用对自己的过去感到羞愧，你其实应该要非常的坦诚的表现自己。那这个羞愧这个词语呢，在当时其实德国一直以来都会不断的要讨论，不断去面对这样的问题。那如何去面对处理自己的羞愧，或者是处理自己对于过去的这种耻辱等等。但是我觉得当时法斯比达他的这句话里面就特别提到说，我们其实不用去担心这件事情，我们可以直接的大方表现自己。那这个是我在当时看这部作品的时候得到非常深刻的一项印象。
Yeah, well, if you mentioned I think the most important film of German film industry, I think, or film history, and you were talking about the end of the German New Wave. I think Germany in the autumn is the end of the history of the new German cinema, because it was the last really self-financed film. It was a really collective work with very different talents and very different ways of seeing it. You remember maybe Volker Schlöndorff's film, which was very has a lot of distance, a lot of culture in it, and this guy Fassbinder just throw himself through the camera. This is my life, take it or leave it. So, and this it is. I think this was the last supper situation, you know, because you couldn't go further, and there was a great. And bad reaction to this film, because it had a political reaction that stated this film is sympathetic with the terrorists. And as I mentioned, I was talking to Margarete von Trotta. She was involved in that project, and being suspected to hide a terrorist or a sympathy to the terrorist, police came and checked all the material for her filmmaking, her privacy, everything. It was just like a backlash from the system. There were 3 or 4 attempts to recreate a movie like that, and it was totally failed. Even when great filmmakers like Alexander Kluge were involved, but it couldn't happen again, because you know, like in Star Wars, the Empire strikes back.
在你刚刚提到这个《Germany in Autumn》这部作品里面，其实它当时是在德国新浪潮的后期所拍摄的一部作品。我觉得这个是当时他们能够反映德国新浪潮里面大概是最后一部作品了，因为这部作品依然是集体自筹募资所拍摄的一部电影，也是集体创作。在这个作品里面，其实它的内容跟种类非常的多元，比如说Volker Schlöndorff 的他的作品里面就有很多的距离，也有很多不同的这个场景。然后，但是在法斯宾达的作品，他就直接把自己的生活公开在你眼前，说这就是我的生活，你要么就接受，要不然就拉倒。这种情况，这样的模式其实非常的特别，非常的有趣。但这个作品后来上映之后，其实毁誉参半。一部分原因是因为政府官方当时认为说这部作品，他们宣称这部作品对于恐怖主义还有恐怖分子而有同情之心，所以在这种情况之下，他们就认为这样的作品是有问题的。所以我之前有提到过跟 Margarete von Trotta 讨论的时候，他就提到，这导演就提到说，当时他也参与这部作品之后，就有警察上门来去搜索他的所有的拍摄素材呀，很多他的隐私的内容跟的物品等等。所以后来这个情况之下，大家对于这个作品的评价就好坏不一。而且后来虽然还有其他导演也试图想要用这样的模式去做集体创作，可是都不成功。不论是有没有比如说 Kluge 这样非常有名的导演一起参与，还是没有办法再拍出这样的作品跟这样的模式。所以对我来说，这个作品的确呈现出来了当时的某一个特殊时代背景情况的一个集体创作的成果跟过程。
Alright， 好。那因为我们原本是要留30分钟映后，但是其实因为我们这个中间会现场口译，那所以我想可能就我们现在就可以先开放给现场的观众。那因为刚刚大家也看了短片集，所以其实是可以让大家开始有一些的互动跟2位讲者。那当然就是说，如果我当然这边还有问题，不过我想这个开放现场其实是一个很珍贵的一个机会，那可以让现场的朋友。
I think this is a great opportunity for us to open up the floor for questions and answers from the audience. They have just watched a selections of short films from this period in Germany. So if there are any questions, please feel
这
free
边
to raise
前
them.
面有一
Yes,
位
we have a
观众。
ladies who have a questions, and you have the microphone. 有麦克风了吗？
有，
请说。
可以说了。
好，大家好，我想请问一下，就是因为我们这次台北电影节看到的短片，其实都比较是在1959到1964，然后刚好是奥伯豪森宣言的前后。那因为我们大部分看到的都是一些比较实验类型或者是活动纪实片，所以我就想要很直接的想请问一下 George，就是奥伯豪森宣言提出来之后，他像前面讲座也有提到，是因为前面可能有一些比较保守或者极端的政府所在控制，所以大家认为大家认为电影已经死了，电影人没有办法自由的去创作。那我想要请问一下，就是奥伯豪森宣言提出来之后，它对于德国的影业有产生了什么样的影响，或者是它是如何引领了德国新浪潮的一个开始？因为我们所知道的后来的荷索、法斯宾达、温德斯跟薛朗多夫，他们都是非常多，他们的风格都是非常不同的。那我就想请问一下，就是奥伯豪森宣言这个时候提出来，在这边有没有遇到一些困难啊，或者是它有没有实质上的影响或者意义啦？
So today in this editions of Taipei Film Festival, we watched a series of short films from 1959 to 1964, around the times when the Oberhausen Manifesto was announced and proposed. And of course, that in the German New Wave, you see directors in very different styles, and in Fassbinders, in Herzog, and also in Wim they have very different style, a very distinct style. So I would like to know that after these manifestos, what kind of impact it has created to the film industries in Germany. We know you have talked about the oppositions or the reactions from the traditional film industry or film production houses. But I would like to know more about, after this manifesto, what kind of influence it has to that generations of filmmakers.
Yeah, it's 60 years ago, and so you have a little feeling of nostalgia, and maybe you tend to idolize it. So, but the most important impact of the manifesto wasn't not that it created a really really new approach to filmmaking, but it opened a space. It was like we have the right and we have the possibility. You have to think about that. I think some 16 first members of this movement had no experience in making feature films, so they were very proud and very brave to say, so we want to make it, and the old guys said, of course, no, let's stick to the old system. The old system has you have to be learning. You have to be a servant to a director, to a filmmaker, and learn and see the maestro, and then you can begin with. And the most important impact of the manifesto was founding of film schools, because in Germany it didn't exist any film school. It even didn't exist film classes in art schools. The first was then in Ulm, where Alexander Kluge worked. So 4 and 6 years after the manifesto began the work of film schools, which offered a totally other system to begin filming, and that was a real revolution.
当然，现在时隔60年之后，我们在讨论到这个宣言的时候，可能会有一些怀旧的心情，可能会觉得把它理想化。但当时的这一个宣言，它其实并没有提出，比如说新的电影拍摄方法，而是向外界宣告说，其实即便不是在参加这些大的制作公司，我们依然有这样的权利，有这样的自由，有这样的机会跟可能性，可以去拍摄电影。那其实这是他们的一个非常有勇气的一个说法，因为其实26位的导演当中，其实有16位，大概以前从来没有拍摄过长片，可是他们有这样的勇气，认为说我们的确有这样的意图跟有机会，也想要去拍摄长片的这样的一个论调跟这样的说法。因为过去其实在德国旧的体制当中的时候，如果你想要成为电影导演，你唯一的方式就是从大师身边学习，你从旁边做助理，在旁边那个帮忙等等，慢慢一步一步的见证跟像学徒一样学习之后，才有机会拍摄电影。所以在当时的这个德国，其实并没有电影学校，也没有美术系里面或艺术系里面也没有电影课程。所以其实这个宣言里面最大的影响是，他们后来成立了电影学校，这是德国的第一间电影学校。他们提出了非常不一样，让大家能够开始踏上电影导演之路的方法。所以这是当时这个宣言他们在提出之后，对于德国的影坛最大的影响。
Maybe I can add one thing. The next impact was the founding of a critical scene. There were some magazines and some new film magazines, and a lot of filmmakers could, like it happens in France, could work as critics. So they had the opportunity to think about what can we do by writing critics, by writing essays, so it was a development of a film culture, not only a film making, but a film culture as a whole. And another thing is important for the development of so different styles was the fact that the two film schools were totally different in style, in a political approach to filmmaking. The one at Berlin was a more or less left movement with the strong opposition against the system. The Munich-based film school were more interested in experimental aesthetics and formal experiments. They called themselves the aesthetic left. like a myth. So and in the tension between those two trends or two styles of filmmaking that developed this vastity and this differences in the German film scene. It's always lacking today, as a filmmaker could tell us. I think. Q, could you tell us?
那另外一方面，在这个宣言提出之后，还有另外一个影响是，后来这些成员他们就开始创办了电影杂志，在上面的时候可以进行各种不同的电影的影评啊等等的。那很多的电影导演也透过写影评的方式，透过书写的方式去进行论述、进行反思，到底能够去拍摄什么样的电影。所以其实这个宣言提出之后，除了刚才提到成立了电影学校之外，还成立了电影杂志，那一起去培养跟塑造了德国社会整体的电影文化。那另外一方面是刚才观众提到的是，这为什么这个时期会导演会有这么风格这么多元的情况，其实是因为当时后来继而成立了2间不同的电影学校，这2间电影学校的风格跟教授的方法还有历史形态都非常的不同，所以他们2个之间的紧绷关系还有这个对比关系非常的明显。在德国柏林的这个电影学校呢，他们就非常强调左派思想，他们要去反对体制等等。到了在慕尼黑这个学校呢，他们比较强调的是实验性，尤其是形式上面的实验风格。他们也常常说自己是美学左派，就是这2个他们之间彼此 之间有很多不同的，比如说抗衡啊，或者不同的这个论辩等等，所以造就了在这个时期的风格其实非常的多元。也许吴 Sema 可以跟我们分享一下，你现在看到的德国的电影是不是还有这么多风格多元的可能性跟机会？
Yeah, I think the language, in filmmaking or the aesthetics, that is something that is pretty much lacking, actually, like George said. So, the last movie I've seen on a platform that I was streaming was Maurice Pialat, a French director. But this film was like 1982, À nos amours. That was one movie in the last few weeks that I discovered that really confronted me with my own stereotype kind of thinking. So I feel like I've really felt after watching it, oh my God, that was a film really challenging me, because not only filmically, with the content, the whole story with this beautiful girl, growing up and stuff like that, but it was aesthetically so very powerful. And those kind of movies, yeah, it's really depending on the filmmakers who are really who feel so repressed or oppressed that they have to go this typical way of filmmaking, and so they really get into the wrong direction because they cannot really discover or self-discover their language. And that's a huge problem. And you cannot really say it's a problem, but it's so sad because that's what we want in the cinema. We want another perspective, and we don't want to see, the mainstream kind of film editing.
那我的确也认为，现在的德国电影当中，他们有时候会缺少很多不一样或多样化的电影语汇等等。我最近在串流平台上面看到这个电影，其实是法国电影，是1982年的电影。那这部电影里面其实就不断挑战我的很多刻板印象，它也其实在不论是形式上面、故事或者是题材美感上面，都不断的会让我有很多新的启发跟新的想法。但现在其实我们反倒没有比较少有这样的作品会出现在现在当代的社会或当代的作品当中的。也许必须要在某一个很压抑的社会当中，或者是某一个压抑的世代里面，他们必须要透过这样的方式进行反抗之后，才会有很多新的可能性跟新的探索、新的出路等等。既然现在的情况当然不能说是问题，但是的确我们看到了很多的不论是剪辑或拍摄都变得有点千篇一律，或者是比较了无新意的情况之下，我们的确少了很多过去我们看到的多样性存在。
好，
看现场还有没有？
Any other questions from the audience? Yes, we do have a question.
有刚同一位观众，
后面还有别的问题吗？
后面
在最后面
We have someone far in the back. Just a second. 我们把麦克风交给您，然后拿到麦克风就可以请您发问了。
Sorry, do I ask my question in English or should
Either
I-
way, up to you.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation and your very fruitful discussion. My question will be that you have mentioned that in Oberhauser Manifesto they didn't claim a new way of making films, but I still want to know, in their creation, do they have any theoretical basis, like in skills or in styles or in aesthetics? Do they have discussed what will be a proper film instead of this old film or so-called daddy cinema? Yes. So because I'm not really sure whether they have discussed this, I only know that Kluge is personally close with Adorno, but there's no very clear discussion about the theoretical basis of all these. So I'm just curious whether there is anything that you would like to share. Thank you.
Yeah,
I remember a story about the discussion of the manifesto, which told Edgar Reitz, and Edgar Reitz told Alexander Kluge did the talking, and we restricted ourselves to looking heroic. So you can imagine that there was two different approaches. The one was really a new theory. It came from the critical theory, and it led to a strain of cinematic thinking, of films which didn't tell a story, but you see a film thinking. That came from Alexander Kluge to like today, maybe Robert Bramkamp and Susanne Weyrich, scholars of Alexander Kluge, develop and they call it like thinking film. And the other side, the most of the young filmmakers who followed the manifesto were just trying to learn by doing. They had no theoretical basis. They just wanted to make films, and that's all. So some of them ended in the industry because filmmaking was all they wanted, and they didn't want to think about what they're doing. So these two fractions developed like two worlds. And these two cinematic worlds wouldn't come together again. And today, I think today the theory of film and the thinking about language, about style, about pictures, why do I have my camera here and not there, is just a sin. You learn at the film schools, don't think because if you begin to think, you can work. So this lack of consciousness is a very deep problem. It's just like it forces a lot of filmmakers to leave the film scene and go to the art scene, because in the art scene you are expected to think a little bit about your work, and a lot of filmmakers go from the cinema to the museum, because in the museum there's a freedom and there's a reflection, and there's another political economy. You don't have to think about marketing so much. You don't have to think about mass audiences, and it's like finding a niche for thinking movies or experimental movies, going out from the cinema, going to the art scene.
在当时这个宣言的其中的成员当中，我上次是之前跟那个 Edward Cruz Race 有讨论过，他说其实里面也分成两派。那一派的话，像 Kluber 他就是说，我们不断要去思索，不断的思考，我们的电影其实并不一定要说故事，我们要去呈现的是我们的思维过程、我们的思想等等。所以这个是他们所谓的 thinking film 的这个模式。那另外一派的人则认为 不管，我们就是要拍电影。我觉得这种非常强大的热情，说我是想要拍电影，那我就是想要去试试看，我想要真的开始从做中学，这是他们另外一派的做法。所以这两派其实后来在这个宣言发表之后呢，其实这两派之间他们有一些不同的意见之后，后来这两派其实就渐行渐远。所以你看到这两派他们所呈现出来的作品也有相当大的不同。那当然从电影学院出来的就会说，你要去不断的思考，到底这个作品要怎么拍，镜位要怎么摆，然后这个构图要怎么呈现等等。那有些人就会觉得这样的模式里面一直想到最后我就什么都拍不了，因为我就不断的在思考，就导致我根本没有办法去想我到底是要拍什么东西。那这种情况之下，有些导演他们就从电影圈离开，他们也许转进到了艺术圈，或者转移进到了博物馆等等，因为他们觉得在这样的领域当中，他们也许有更多实验的机会，有更多比如说自由的发挥的机会，反而没有这么多比如说过去传统电影圈的约束跟限制。他们也许在这些不同的领域里面去找到更多他们认定比如说小众的观众或小众的机会等等。所以的确在这个目前的发展当中的时候，从当时到现在，有一些的电影导演也就因此没有继续从事电影产业，而转进到其他的产业。这个是当时这个宣言的发表之后，其实不论内部讨论或者是后面的发展所出现的情况。
好，现场观众还有其他的问题吗
Any other questions from the audience?
？OK， 好，
那就到你。
那我就继续再问那个 George 一些问题，就是台湾关于德国电影的翻译本比较少。那我们所知道的就是卡里加利博士的小屋，然后大都会以及留别签这些德国表现主义及室内剧的一些风格运镜、场面调度，其实是非常惊艳的。但是后来很不幸的遇到了比较集权的政治，就像台湾也有遇上了国民党，就我们姑且算是有集权的政府来控制我们的言论或者禁言，以至于我们有一阵子没有办法说自己的话。然后到了后来导演所说的就是开始有一些人去限制说这个不要讲那个不要讲，然后后来奥伯豪森宣言之后，德国电影学校也开始了之后，然后我就想请问一下，那德国新浪潮最主要的一个核心或是在谈论的命题会是什么？那像今年台湾新电影又40年了，大家又在回头问说，那有没有后新电影？就想要另外问那个女导演，就是以她的观察，就是德国在新浪潮之后的后新电影是什么样的样貌啊？以及另外，既然在这里就想要问一个八卦，就是当那个德国新浪潮出现的时候，其实法国新浪潮跟意大利新写实主义已经在兴起了，那德国算是比较晚追上，那他在创作的过程中会不会有一点想较劲，或者是开出自己的一个风格，这是我们台湾在这边所无法从书中或者什么知道的，想要直接请问一下 George 这样子，谢谢。
In Taiwan, we don't have a lot of books talking about German films. We have limited numbers of books. So I would like to know that after the Oberhausen manifestos, after this group of directors announced these manifestos, are there any particular kind of topics or subjects they focus on in their works? Because in Taiwan, we used to, under the authoritarian regimes from KMT, and there's a period that we were not allowed to speak a lot of the topic or subjects in our films. There were a lot of taboos, so we do experience that kind of things. That's just like mentioned, that's because of the conservative governments in Germany, there were some restrictions or taboos in that German industries, and then these Oberhausen's manifestos tried to break down these taboos or these restrictions that you may have. So I would like to know, are there any common things that you see among the directors in these German New Wave directors, and also that before the German New Wave, there are actually French New Wave, and there are also Italian New Surrealisms, New Realisms. So I would like to know, are there any kind of competitions between these different new waves in European countries? And I would also like to ask Usama about the current situations in Germany, because now in Taiwan we are memorializing the 40 years anniversary of the Taiwanese New Wave, and people have been thinking about what kind of subjects that the contemporary directors are focusing on. So I would like to know from Usama, do you see are there any common subject or themes that you see from the contemporary German films?
So
Yeah. All right. I really have to think about it because maybe George, can you help me? Because I don't know if there are, if there are common topics, because at some point, at our Munich Film School, people say, Munich Film School, these students, they've got no stories to tell, they are lacking conflicts and stuff like that. But yeah, I think I do feel that there are, of course, filmmakers like me who grew up between two cultures, and I think the identity question in Germany is pretty important, and because there is this question of how you're treating people, and me, I'm not into racism, but I can imagine that there are filmmakers who really want to make movies about racism. Me, for example, my first movie, my graduation film, was very much about sexuality and solitude, and how you dare to talk to people frankly.
我可能要想一下，到底现在德国当代电影里面有什么共通的主题？因为有些人会批评说，比如说从慕尼黑电影学校里面出来的学生，他们可能没有故事好说，或者是他们缺乏冲突，所以他们没有什么故事可以在电影里面说出来。但我认为，其实，在很多现在德国电影里面，身份认同也许是一个非常大人们常常触及的主题。那我自己做的作品里面，并没有去讨论到，比如说种族主义的问题。不过，我相信很多的德国导演也许会有兴趣，或者是想要去着手或者是触碰这个议题。那我主要是关心的是，比如说人们如何彼此对待、彼此相处等等。那我自己的第一部作品，这个海力部分类里面就要提到的是，人们对于很多东西的刻板印象，我们如何去对抗，还有去反映这个刻板印象，如何去跟这个刻板印象互动，或者是排拒这样的刻板印象。
Yeah, I think that a conflict that exists not only in Germany, but it's a universal conflict in the film history, is that between the author and the genre. And this conflict always changes in the aftermath of the Oberhausen Manifesto. The author was the godlike figure, like in the Nouvelle Vague in France, which never was like that in English or Italian cinema, because they knew their maestros like Fellini or something, but they were much more into the collectiveness. And what happened after the Oberhausen Manifesto was that radicalism of the author theory was created a new problem, because the author was an institution that wasn't very democratic. That it was a very romantic concept of filmmaking. The genius makes films, and then they came the backlash, and in the 70s and the 80s, young filmmakers rediscovered genre. And they tried to make crime movies, to make comedies, to make even Western, and then this led to situation where it was like dissolving the genres again in the television genres and the serialization, and again everyone was calling, come back also, everything is forgotten, and so it was like a wave. The author genre at the moment being, I think everybody says, oh my God, we have to rediscover genre because so we can reach the audience. We just make a little variation in the genre. We actualize everything, but we have to deliver genre, and this will be going on and on and on. But it's not a German problem. It's only in Germany it's a little more dramatic than on other places. But it's a universal question. What is a film? Is it a mass communication media, or is it an art? And this question has no answer. It is the answer is in the tension between them both. Because every author needs collaboration, needs a structure of themes, and this is also the case with finding the themes. As you said, I see that quite the same way. There are periods where you don't find a story to tell because there is no collective consciousness. So in Germany, you have not a consensus of what is our story, what are we, and I think cinema is depending on a collective consciousness, on a collective narrative, and if this doesn't exist, you can only make, like you said, you can only make movies about solitude, about loneliness, about alienation. But these films are also needed. I need to know why other people are so lonely, and I see it in the films, and I maybe a film can force me to overcome the loneliness and the alienation, force me to search for the sources of alienation. So this is, of course, no mainstream phenomenon. It's this. If we have no thinking film, maybe we have a searching film, searching for myself, searching for our connections, and I'm very happy to see, painful sometimes, but I'm happy to see films searching.
其实，在德国的影坛当中有一件冲突，其实并不只是德国啦，其实普世之间、各国之间都有这样的这个冲突，就是作者跟类型之间的冲突。有时候这永远都是在不断摆荡的过程。有时候我们会觉得这个作者为上，作者至上，导演说了算，导演是至高无上，跟神明一般的存在，好像只有天才才可以成为导演。在一段时期的德国也是这样的情况，他们这种时候其实。拍电影变得就并不是很民主化的一个过程，好像只有某一些天才或者是这个有些天纵英明的情况之下才可以拍电影这个情况。但后来的时候就会有一个反动力量认为说，我们应该要去寻找不同的类型，比如说犯罪的电影、喜剧电影等等特定的类型，才有办法能够去触及到 大多数的观众。那很多时候他们有时候他们又重新再摆荡回来到作者，或者在作者跟类型之间的话，其实不断在摆荡当中。那现在德国的电影的话，他们现在似乎是摆荡到了类型的部分，那希望能够从这个类型当中去寻找新的题材，然后注意到更多的观众等等。这样的论战其实永远都不会有答案，那是一个不断的在论辩的过程，就像是很多人讨论说，到底电影是什么？电影是大众传播还是艺术呢？这两者之间其实并没有一个绝对值。那其实到很多数的时候，可能是介于这两者之间，要去触及到各种不同的观众。其实我觉得有时候这个电影里面的主题会涉及到的是，有没有故事可以说？那这个故事呢，其实会涉及到很多集体意识。那集体意识里面，比如说德国有段时期的时候，这很多的电影其实里面是没有特定的故事的，因为其实那个时候人们缺乏集体意识，很多时候他们还在问我们是谁，那我们的集体意识是什么？在这种情况之下，你就很难用一个集体的论述或集体的模式来说出一个故事。那当这个时候的是，也许就会他们会去讨论到很多电影，去讨论到比如说孤独啊、孤单啊、孤寂等等。那有时候这些电影也可以帮助我们去思考，到底人为什么会这么孤单？那为什么会把自己处在一个这么疏离、这么孤绝的位置当中？那透过电影，也许能够迫使我去思考，到底怎么样去克服这样的孤单或孤寂。那这个电影呢，我们刚才提到有这种 thinking films， 去透过电影来表达我们的思考。这种电影也许我们姑且可以称之为是 searching film， 不断在追寻的电影，追寻一些答案，追寻一些人为什么身为人，或者是人为什么会有这些问题的这些电影。我觉得不论是哪种电影，都是某些人在某些时期需要看到的电影。
好，现场观众还有其他的问题想要问我们的讲者吗？
Any other
在
questions?
最后一排。
We have someone in the far back.
也是刚刚同一位先生。
Just a second.
Thank you. Sorry, I have another question that I just want to ask. That Frau Borcher, that as you has criticized the Hollywood style of movie, and I'm just curious that what will be your style of movie, or what do you think a proper movie should be like for you? Yeah, thank you.
Well, I haven't really criticized the US way of filmmaking. I said, especially here in Germany, I grew up also with German movies and with the German language. So I just was asking myself, why do we have to, approach to US filmmaking? Why do we have to copy that? This phenomenon is not only in Germany, it's also in Mongolia, where I can also see the film industry going directly this way. And I look up to filmmakers like in China, there is Wong Kar-wai, and in Taiwan, there is, I forgot his name, but he made 3 times, and you can find your own way of filmmaking. So it is just a capitalistic way, when we approach the US filmmaking. And I just ask myself, why do we have to do that? It's just because everybody is crazy about money, and that's just the role that is going very well. And everybody hooks up on this and is crazy about it, but it's not about filmmaking anymore. It's just about this money-making machine. And it's such a pity to feel it, especially in our world today. And for me, I'm a young filmmaker, you can say, and I try to find my own way. We have so many filmmakers and so many people, you can say, who get oppressed by money. And me, I'm lucky. I don't have yet the oppression of doing things only for money. And as long as I have this right, I have to do what I feel, and I don't want to get suppressed by money and copy all these things. So I'm also looking for my own film language. And so this is a big process I'm in, and we have to trust this process and continue by going it. Yeah.
那我刚才的论述当中，其实并没有在批判美国的制片或者是电影拍摄方式，我只是在反思的是，我自己身在德国，在德国德语的这个语境当中的时候，德国的电影工业或德国的这些制度跟机制里面，为什么会一直希望大家能够去复制美国的这种电影的工业的运作模式？其实我现在看到，并不是在德国，在蒙古也是如此，大家都似乎只想要完全的比如说仿效美国的模式，因为觉得美国模式过去很成功，或者有成功经验之后，如果我们也比较办理的话，是不是也能够有同样相同的成功经验？我一直在怀疑跟反思的是，是不是每个国家都必须要采取这样的模式？有没有什么其他的可能性？因为比如说在香港的话，看到有王家卫，或者在台湾的话，看到有侯孝贤导演拍过《最好的时光》等等。那这些的导演，他们的确都有他们自己的方式、自己的语汇，然后自己的这个创作电影的可能性。我一直在思考是有没有其他的机会跟可能性。很多的时候呢，因为进入到这个体制之后，到最后他们就纠结点或者他们的症结点，并不再是电影创作，而是怎么样卖得更好，怎么样会有更多票房、更多市场、更多商业机制跟商业的获利等等。那我自己很幸运，目前还没有受到这个金钱的压迫，我还有自己的这个机会可以去探索我想要拍摄电影的这个方式跟电影的语汇。当然这是一个漫长的摸索过程，但是我希望自己在目前的过程当中的时候，不会因为在金钱或者是在经费的要求或者是影响之下，不得不去学习或者是模仿或者是参照特定的拍摄模式。
好，好，因为时间的关系，我们可能还有最后2个问题。那现场有没有观众还想要再发问的呢？
I think due to time constraint, we can open up for the last 1 or 2 questions. Are there any last questions?
OK， 还是君琪老师是不是刚刚还有一些问题也可以再跟？
就是我们刚刚呢有一直提到一个关键字，就是认同的问题 ，identity problem。那这个 identity problem 其实对于很多的创作者来讲，那我们常常会遇到女性创作者就会被询问说，那所以你拍的电影是女性电影吗？那同样的问题其实也会出现在所谓的国族电影，就是如果今天这部片是德国电影的话，那我很好奇吴森玛会怎么去回应，就是你的电影是德国电影吗？你的电影会是女性电影吗？或者你怎么看待这些所谓的认同放在电影的作品上，或者是会认为我的作品其实是一个无国界的作品，或者是说我的作品不能够被以性别来定义，所以想要从这个问题那去询问吴森玛，那当然就是也许回到更先前的德国新浪潮的时候，去对于所谓的德国电影，当电影有一个国族身份的时候，它后面那个国族身份所代表的德国的一个意涵。
So the next question is directed to Usama first. And when we talk about identity is a very common issues and common themes for a lot of the filmmakers. And for example, when the female filmmakers making films and people ask you, is your film a female film? Or maybe people ask you, is your film a German film? So how do you respond to these tags that is placed on your films? And do you try to resist it, or how do you respond to those themes, those identity? And also we'll go back to the German new wave. Maybe we can ask Gio about this question as well. In that German new wave, that people would say that they would like to make new German films, and does that new German film, that national title in front of films, represent something for that group of filmmakers at that time?
When people ask me this question, is this a female movie and stuff like that, or people they ask you that because you are female, and that's very funny. And after some years now, I knew it before, but it's always learning by doing. But you don't have to talk so much. And so I just thought to myself, maybe, movies, especially your movie, some people get it, some don't, and they will understand it. And I don't have to give my opinion, Sometimes opinions are very, very important, but actually I prefer not to say always, your opinion on this, and when you're asked and when you have this discussion like now, like what we do right now, it's very important that you say what you think and that you respond honestly as possible. That's very important to have a good conversation. That's something I really like. But in general, if it's a female movie or perspective, whatever, it's not that important because there is nothing like that.
我当然意识到会注意到的是，人们会问我说这部片是不是女性电影的时候，是因为我是女性导演，所以他们问我说你这部作品是不是女性电影？那我其实也从很多的经验开始慢慢学习到，其实有时候人们会好奇或想问很多问题，但是我有时候会选择不要去表达我太多个人的意见，因为我拍出来的电影，有些人也许看得懂，有些人也许不了解或不明白的时候，他们会提出各种不同的问题，但我自己会倾向选择不要去提供太多个人意见，让大家去自由去诠释跟自我去试图了解跟我所拍出的电影。所以当然我很喜欢很享受，比如说我们像今天这样可以对话的时刻，但是除此之外的话，我平常并不会针对我自己的电影做太多的诠释，或者是给太多个人的意见，让大家能够去自由的理解。
I have to add that cinema's most universal language in the world, and so there are periods in the film history where the interchange leads us to something, and maybe this is the false dream of Hollywood, to create a universal language for the movie, but it's a universal language of capitalism, not the universal language of people, and what I'm dreaming of would be films that have no identity, like female, like German, like this, like that. I'm dreaming of a kind of Germany in the autumn, but the world in the autumn. Cinema we could really put together for a universal view. As pessimistic it may be for the moment, but the optimism is in the working together, and that is for me the utopian aspect in movie making. It's not being German, not being female. It's being human, and changing, exchanging pictures of humanity.
很多人说电影是一种普世语言，但其实我认为常常很多时候是因为不同的文化或不同之间的交流的时候，会产生出很多新的火花。那很多时候，好莱坞可能会说这电影是个普世语言，可是他们所推行的普世语言其实并不是电影的普世语言，而是资本主义的普世语言。所以我希望如果有机会未来的话，我的理想里面当中，这些电影不应该有特定的标签或身份，比如说女性电影啊、德国电影等等，我希望它是一个普世的电影，然后也希望也许我们刚才提到这个 Germany in Autumn 的时候，它是一个集体创作出来的作品，我希望也许未来我们可以创作一部片叫做 The World in Autumn， 就是一样是集体创作的电影，一同去呈现出目前世界集体的情绪跟氛围。也许现在听起来有点悲观，这集体氛围好像有点不乐观，但是我觉得乐观的部分是在于彼此之间互相合作之后，可以去创作出这些新的作品出来。我觉得到最后我们希望能够关注的是电影它并不是某个国家的电影或者是某一个性别的电影，而是人的电影，透过这种电影的方式来去呈现人的价值。
很谢谢 George 跟吴森嘛，然后也谢谢现场观众朋友很精彩的问题。那我现场交给建伦。
So this concludes our sessions. Thank you, Sema. Thank you, Jill, for your participation, and thank you everyone in the audience for staying with us.
好，那我们最后再以最热烈的掌声感谢今天的讲者以及主持人。
So once again, thank you everyone for your participations online. Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Ms. Wang, and also Sema.
好
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
拜。
Goodbye.
Bye bye.
谢谢大家。